He's ridden at the Olympics and done quite a lot of different disciplines as well. So first things first, Adrian, can you tell me a bit about yourself and how you got into cycling and bike fitting?
Well, I was 60 last year, so I've been riding since I was 11. So yeah, this year will be 50 years. So I just started. Some of the lads were in the local club. It just happened that the club room was literally 500 meters from our house in Cannock. Didn't initially like it. Sort of back then, the first club run I went on as an 11-year-old was Cannock to Ashbourne and back. I think I got pushed all the way there and all the way back and back in tears. And anyway, sort of eventually got into the swing of it, raced straight away. Won my first race and that first year on a bike that my mum had bought out the Grattan catalogue, which you lot won't know what the Grattan catalogue is, but just a very basic bike. And then just progressed as a schoolboy or youth rider. Won the National Junior Pursuit when tracks were all outside, so none of the luxury of riding indoors. And then that progressed to the Olympics in Los Angeles. And again, no winters spent indoors training. It was like just summer riding if the weather was dry enough to train on the track. After the Olympics, I was riding the road before, but switched just 100% to the road. I had 1 year as an amateur and then turned pro for ANC Halfords, which was based not far from Trentham, and then rode the Tour in '87, which finished me off. I was never quite the same again, and then I've just always liked riding, so it doesn't matter what the bike is. So from then on, it was just a mixture of mountain biking and the road, some track, and I didn't do cyclocross properly until I was 40. I had 2 seasons across, but me being me, rather than race vets, I did elite and finished 4th overall in the elite national trophy. And so yeah, basically I was a multi-sport rider before a multi-sport rider was a thing. So yeah, but just I wouldn't class myself as a cyclocross rider or as a mountain biker. I just like riding off road. I haven't got the skill that some of you lot have got today. It's sort of I won't throw myself down rock gardens or anything like that. But yeah, won national medals at, well, as of last year, gravel, mountain biking, track, road and cyclocross, and then ridden for GB at track, road, mountain biking and cyclocross. So very diverse. So, and then yeah, still here. Been bike fitting 20 years before bike fitting was a thing, and all the fancy technology that is used but doesn't really fit. It's the fitter that fits. But always been very fussy about my own position, going back to when I was properly racing. And aero, which we'll talk about. Aero isn't a new thing. I was wearing skin suits in races when I was a junior, so in road races. So it's not a new thing at all, but everyone thinks it is.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Adrian. So what do you think is the most important part about bike fitting?
Obviously the bike, but the most important aero component on the bike is it's no fancy aero cockpit, it's no fancy aero seat post. It's the biggest aero component on the bike is me and you. Probably 80% of the aero equation is me and you. And it doesn't matter what you read from the manufacturers that it saves you this bike will save you 3 watts, 4 watts, and read the small print at World Tour speed at 28 miles an hour. But read the detail again. It's all in the wind tunnel, but just of the bike and not you on the bike. So it's how aero the bike is. And if you listed all of the things that might save you watts, which are important at a World Tour level, there's one website that I totted it all up, and there was 10 things that you can do to save watts, and it was 150 watts or 130 to 150 watts, which I was just saying to Maddie, sort of I did some testing on I had 2 bikes last year. One was a Pinarello F8 with 8 50mm Hunt wheels, and I've got an alloy Trek gravel bike. So just all alloy components, non-aero wheels, but I did put GP 5000s, the same as the other bike, and I put my power pedals on both bikes, and then just did an unscientific test over an hour. And for the difference in speed, 4 was 0.1 of a mile an hour. 4 2 watts difference, 2 heartbeats different. Yeah, and it was 2 different days, I understand that, but it was similar wind direction. Not the conditions weren't that different, but the speed was negligible. But everyone that's seen the photos of the 2 bikes, I ask how much speed difference they think is between the 2, and nearly everyone has said, 2 to 3 mile an hour difference, or 10 to 20% difference, and I said it's not even close. It's so it's you on the bike that will make you aero, not necessarily the bike. The bikes will make a difference, jumping out of corners, accelerating, climbing, but think aero component, and that's you, and not necessarily the bike. Yeah, you want good wheels, good tires, but those other things are real marginal gains that will only make a difference will make more of a difference at 28 miles an hour. And if you read the small print on testing, it's all at World Tour speed of 27, 28 miles an hour. And the differences drop drastically once you go below 20 miles an hour. So, or percentage differences in what you'll save. So, sorry. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you now. Can you hear us?
Hello?
Hello, can you hear us?
No, sorry about that.
It's all right. Can you hear us now?
Yeah. So sorry, I'm using my phone to for the camera. So yeah, you're the biggest component on the bike. So it's having a bike that you can adapt or fit to you to get you in that aero position. And the aero position is, I know everyone looks at the riders today, and if you look at Remco and the aero position, he can, not on his TT bike, on his road bike, and it's getting that the most aero position on a road bike, according to the science, is when your forearms are horizontal to the ground, just like Remco when he's in full flight. That's what you should be looking for. If you can't bend your elbows and ride in that position for long periods of time, you're just wasting energy. And the data I've seen at 27 miles an hour, with a baseline where you're sat up in a bolt upright position on the hoods, to you having your elbows parallel to the ground, at 27 miles an hour is a 33 watt saving. So if you can't bend those elbows and get those forearms parallel to the ground, then you're, as you can see, 30 watts is a lot. As I said earlier, the difference below 20 miles an hour is only 10 watts. So at 18 miles an hour, it's only about 10 watts. So it's having a bike, and then it's down to you training in that position to get yourself aero.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Adrian. So how did they know that their bike fits? Because obviously they'll all have got a bike online or from a bike shop, but how do they know? How can they tell that their bike fits, and what are the warning signs that their bike might not potentially fit them very well?
This is where it becomes difficult. It's like some people think a bike fits only when you're injured or you've got problems, but you can have no problems on the bike, but be really inefficient, that you're losing 10 to 20% if the saddle's a centimetre too high, a centimetre too low, or centimetre for saddle, centimetre back, centimetre forward. You can have no problems at all. So it's not necessarily a hard one. It's hard just to say they'll know unless someone says something to them. But it seems today a lot of people won't say anything to people about how bad their position is. But if you feel like if you feel like you can't bend your elbows and you can only ride at the front with your arms locked out, that's something. So if you try to bend those elbows and you can't last more than a minute, there's something wrong. And that's a big one I see, is that people will ride with their arms locked out and their shoulders like up here and just resting their hands and upper body on the bars without being able to bend their elbows. And that can be to do with the saddle being too high, too far forward, the saddle pointing down, that it's like almost impossible. Doesn't matter what anyone says, I'll bend your elbows. You can't last a minute without wanting to straighten your elbows. So I'd say that's a big thing. If there's anything, is that inability to bend their elbows. And a lot of that has been down to the extreme positions riders have been putting themselves in the last few years, where there's a massive drop between the saddle and the bars because they thought that having a big drop is aero, but it's only aero if you can hold an aero position. So, and as you've noticed with TT bikes, the front end of TT bikes has actually come up to allow riders to get a more aero tucked in position. And I think you'll start to see that more in road racing. It's happening on the track in endurance racing. They're like coming up at the front so they can ride on those strange bars they're using on the track as if they are tri-bars. So, but it's not something sometimes that you'll feel. But if the habit is to lock your arms out, then that is one.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Adrian. Next up, we just want to talk a bit about cleat position and float. So is that something that you think's quite important for the riders to think about?
Yes, and don't listen to the internet. The internet will tell you, so that this is, you go and ask online about cleat position. The one you'll get, the biggest one you'll get, is whack your cleats all the way back, which annoys me to hell, because there's no industry standard where those holes that you screw the cleat into are on a shoe. And for some people, the ideal place may be all the way back, but those holes in different brands of shoe can be a centimetre and a half different fore and aft. Just to give you an idea of, so the cleat should be fitted to your foot, not the holes on the shoe, which is what basically people are telling you to do when they say whack your cleats back. As I say, it's probably okay for some people, but I've fitted people that have bought 2 different brands of shoe to the fit, and yes, on one brand of shoe the cleats are all the way back. So basically 2 brands of shoe, the cleats are in exactly the same place once I fitted them. Yeah, on one brand of shoe the cleats are all the way back. On the other brand of shoe, they're all the way forward, but they're in exactly the same place for their foot. It's just the one with the cleats all the way forward, they're just holes are in a different place. So the brand of shoe with the cleats all the way forward, which is in exactly the same place as the other brand, if I push those all the way back based on the internet, they would be 1.5 centimetres further back than the other brand that is all the way back. So those holes, there is no industry standard. So it should be in relation to your foot. And as a baseline that works for most people, it's marking the big ball of the foot and little ball of the foot, and the pedal spindle goes through the middle. That's your start point, but not what the internet says, which is whack them back. And it's a bit of a busman's holiday for me, but I went online to try and find the shoes of some of the pros. And so I found 4 world champions, current and past, and none of them have got the cleats all the way back. They're either in the middle or forward. So this all the way back is crap. It's like, unless it's right for your foot, but not where the holes are on the shoe. As for the float, again, those 4 wheel, some people think all the pros are on fixed cleats. They're not. Those 4 world champions, and I'll say them, it's Pogacar, Valverde, Sagan, and Van der Poel. None of those are on fixed cleats. There's one on blue, there's one on red look cleats, which is the biggest amount of float, and then the other ones is I think Pog's on he's on yellow cleats, Shimano cleats, and then the other one's silver cleats, I think. But fixed cleats are fine as long as you know the exact position they need to be in. You've got no leeway. They've got to be bang on. And if you've ever watched Mark Cavendish in the Tour, he is forever messing with the cleats because he does ride fixed cleats. They've got to be so bang on. With float, you have room for freedom. Yeah, ideally, if it's a 6-degree float, and your cleat is in a neutral position, it's not movement through the pedal stroke, but you have freedom. So if it's 6 degrees of float in the cleat, and it's in a neutral position, there's 3 degrees of freedom one way and 3 the other. But you can have it slightly in the wrong place, and it can be 4 degrees one way and 2 the other, and not cause you any problems. It can even be 5 and not one way and 1 the other. Extreme cases, you can have all the float one way, and as long as you don't feel like you're pushing against anything, you could have none the other way. But float is misconceived as it's for people, and it does help people that move around a lot, but that's other issues. They've got biomechanical issues probably further up the chain. But float allows you to make a mistake and get away with it, where fixed cleats, they've got to be absolutely bang on position, otherwise it's going to cause knee issues, hip issues, even back issues, because you're trying to twist the whole body.
Perfect. So talking about mobility and things like that, does that ever affect your position? Or if you've got one bike fit and you've fitted that, will that be the same forever?
I wouldn't say forever, because things are changing all of the time. So like bikes are changing. Definitely positions of, from my time to now, it's a different sport. But even in the last few years, it's all changed. Mobility is a strange. Definitely, everyone. I hate the word stretching, but everyone needs to keep loose and keep mobile, and it should be part of your training regime where you keep loose and mobile. And it won't have you can overstretch, which can cause problems. But having a routine, yoga, Pilates, whatever you want to call it, is good for you in general. It's good for your health and well-being. So it's good for you. But I get people to go through a series of just simple things like touching the toes. I do a hamstring stretch to check the hamstrings, and it doesn't always mean the guy that can get his or girl that can get their hands flat on the floor is going to have the most aero position on a bike. I've seen totally the opposite, where someone that can't not even close to the toes is super aero on the bike. So it doesn't always correspond what you see off the bike to on the bike. But I would say in general, do yoga, do some mobility stuff, because it can and it will help you on the bike. And lots down to, I think on here I'm mainly talking to youngsters, juniors, that you haven't led. Well, you have been sat down at school, so everything you do off the bike can affect how you are on the bike. So you've got two things going on. Your position on the bike, you're bent over. When you're sat down at school at your desk, you're in theory bent over, you're squashed at the hips. And then if you do a lot of driving, you're squashed at the hips. So that's why it is important do some mobility stuff, especially on the hip flexors and the hamstrings, to maybe hopefully help you on the bike. But it doesn't always correspond, but it is worth doing, and to allow you to get into this more aero position that you want.
Perfect. And lastly from me, what are the most cost-effective changes people can make to the positions?
Don't throw loads of money at it to start with, especially sort of if I'm here talking to 15 to 18-year-olds. Do not buy an aero cockpit at all. And hopefully there's some parents listening here. Don't be brainwashed into thinking an all-in-one integrated aero cockpit is going to make you faster. A standard alloy bar and stem is aero, if it allows you to get in an aero position. Plus the benefit of a two-piece bar and stem that's easily adaptable is it can change as you grow. It can change as you get used to a position. But if you're buying a £300 to £1,000 cockpit, it's not something that you're going to change very often. So if you don't change it and you grow, you're just going to fit to a poor cockpit. And then you're going to get a rounded back, hunched up, and things like that. So cost-wise, it's sort of selling myself, but a fitter is making you or fitting you to the bike is or making the bike adaptable, and that's where been able to change mainly the stem and bars. If you can change the stem and bars, there's a good chance, and if the bike is the right size, that if you can change the bar and stem, there's a good chance it's the most cost effective way of getting aero. And yeah, no aero cockpit, no aero seat post, even aero wheels is going to compensate for the poor aero position.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Adrian. So we've got a couple of questions in the chat. If anybody else has any questions, please pop them in the chat now so that Adrian can answer them. So the first one's from Noah, and he's just asking, is there any psychological benefits to a bike fit, like more confidence or something similar?
Well, yeah, knowing you're in it, just ticking a box, because trust me, what you think is aero and what your mates think is aero is usually nothing like aero. So it's ticking a box to make sure that having a second eye on it is pointing things out, even it's the things you need to do afterwards. Like, I presume at the moment there's a lot of you training on the turbo over the winter, and I know from experience, having some parents come here with their youth riders and juniors, that they'll sit on the turbo in the winter, texting the mates on the phone, sat up in a non-aero position, totally non-aero position. So, and they think they're training because they're turning the legs, but you need to ride in the position. You're training indoors to ride in that position outside. So you're not going to be racing, texting your mates. So if you're doing specific stuff on the trainer or even just normal riding, it needs to be in the position you intend to use that effort for outside. So yeah, just like it's to give you the confidence that you're in the right position. So yeah, psychologically, yeah, you can tick a box. And yeah, I've had riders like, he does live local, but he rides in Spain, Lucas Towers, and he came back at the start of last year because he wasn't happy with his position, and I've fitted him before. He rides for one of the biggest Spanish teams in Spain, under 23, and he knew something wasn't right. And not everyone can do this, but he flew back from Spain for the weekend to come and see me. And if you go on my Cadence Sport Instagram page, there's some video of Lucas and Matt Kingston, who Matt races in Italy, in their aero positions. And if you want to know what an aero position should look like, is go on the Cadence Sport Instagram feed, or I think it might be on mine as well, but on the Cadence one, if you want to know what aero looks like, look at Matt and look at Lucas. And that has been 3 years in the making, 4 years in the making to get them into that position. So it's not an instant fix for a lot of people.
Perfect. Thanks for that. Next up's from Hugh. What's your opinion on speed play pedals? As he's heard that a lot of bike fitters have issues with these sort of pedals, but he doesn't know why.
There's no issue with them. It's just you got to know what to do. The issue is they are that the problem. I know what the problem is. It's clipping in. They are, especially when they're new, it's a different technique to get in. They're really stiff. I fitted loads of them. And the problem is there's lots of different components. It's not like just a Look cleat or Shimano cleat where it's a cleat and 3 bolts. With the speed plate, Wahoo speed plate, whatever you want to call it, there's a base plate, which is, there's 3 screws involved there. Then there's 4 screws involved in the actual clipping mechanism, and then there's 2 screws to basically chain. Well, the float is free on a speed plate, so it's not there's no spring to the float. It's just free. Once you clipped in, there's no free float. And if you don't, there's 2 little grub screws on the outside. If you don't screw those in to your preferred position, you've just got 16 degrees of float, which your feet will just be slopping all around. But the biggest issue is this clipping in. The base plate needs to be totally flat, and you have different wedges underneath that base plate to allow for the shape of the sole of the shoe. So if the sole of the shoe's got a curve on it, if you don't put the right spacers wedges in there, that base plate bends, which then bends the spring mechanism to clip in, and that's when people struggle. So and that's why people will, I can understand why some fitters may not like it. As I say, I fitted loads of them, so I know what the issue is. And normally, once it's set right and you've got used to the different way of clipping in, it's fine. It's just getting that base plate, the black base plate, absolutely flat with the sole of the shoe.
Perfect. Thanks, Adrian. We've got one from Ted here. Is there much point in using the drops in a race apart from sprinting or kicking out of corners?
As far as aero goes, then as the science says, it's more aero on the hoods. Yeah, sprinting on the drops, definitely. I prefer to descend. On the drops, I feel it lowers my centre of gravity. I think I've got more control. I prefer the corner on the drops because it allows me to feather the brakes. I can feather the brakes better on the drops than I can on the hoods. But going through a corner, I prefer to be on the drops because I can get, again, this is another subject, cornering, but it allows me to get more aero through the corners, and I can get more traction through the tyres, through the corners on the drops, and I can then come out the corner faster. So yeah, sprinting, descending, cornering, I think is far better on the drops.
Perfect, thank you. And last one from Ollie. Do you do mountain bike fitting at all?
Yeah, I do. I do everything. So it's mountain biking, whatever, cyclocross, this new thing called gravel, which is just rebranded. Early 1990s mountain biking, track bikes as well, from just endurance to pursuit as well. So I do everything. With a mountain bike, it's definitely changed with the fitting on mountain bikes because of the style of the courses these days. Everyone seems to be, if you watch a World Cup, they seem to be sat further forward, maybe a little bit more upright, but I think that's due to I wouldn't ride that sort of mountain bike if it was a long endurance mountain bike ride, but for these punchy courses that World Cups are, and World Champs and National Series, where it's lots of punchy climbs, where you need to probably be further forward on the saddle for steep climbs, then it's a different position than my mountain bike position I had 30 years ago. It's mine was more an endurance, more of a roadie mountain bike position, where it's definitely a different position these days, mountain biking.
Perfect.
But I do mountain bikes.
We've just had another little last minute one from Hugh. What, in your opinion, could cause tailbone aches and pains during a ride?
It could be that the saddle's pointing down and you're pushing back constantly, that you sat too upright, and that can be due to being too high, saddle pointing down too far forward, that's forcing you into rotating your pelvis backwards too much. probably the easiest way to explain it is if you've got a good position and on the hoods, and then you take your hands off the bars and sit bolt upright, you will sit back onto your sit bone, your coccyx, whatever you want to call it. So it could be something to do with that, but without seeing you on the bike, it's hard to say. But it could be that you're just pushing against the saddle in an upright position.
Perfect. Thanks for that, Adrian, and thanks for joining us. I hope you guys have all enjoyed our evening with Adrian, and I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for joining us, Adrian.
Okay, cheers.
See you later, everyone.
Bye.